Riot police clash with protesters during a mass rally in Seoul against the new US-South Korean trade deal. The demonstrators are demanding that the deal be scrapped.
Riot police scuffled with angry lawmakers and other demonstrators in Seoul on Saturday at a rally against a new trade deal with the United States. The clashes occurred as police tried to break up the crowd. Several people have been detained, but no injuries were reported. Roughly 5,000 South Koreans participated in the protest in the capital. They're demanding the free trade agreement with the U.S., which was ratified last week, be overturned. The controversial deal was pushed through Parliament amid protests by thousands of South Koreans and several top lawmakers.
Riot police clash with protesters during a mass rally in Seoul against the new US-South Korean trade deal. The demonstrators are demanding that the deal be scrapped.
Riot police scuffled with angry lawmakers and other demonstrators in Seoul on Saturday at a rally against a new trade deal with the United States. The clashes occurred as police tried to break up the crowd. Several people have been detained, but no injuries were reported. Roughly 5,000 South Koreans participated in the protest in the capital. They're demanding the free trade agreement with the U.S., which was ratified last week, be overturned. The controversial deal was pushed through Parliament amid protests by thousands of South Koreans and several top lawmakers.
Anti-free trade activists in Kuala Lumpur protested outside the venue where American representatives and Malaysian ministers met to discuss further on free trade agreements between the two nations. Carrying placards and chanting slogans condemning the closed-door meetings, they said inking the free trade agreement would spell disaster for Malaysians who would be unable to compete with the financial backing of Americans. Calling the US unscrupulous, they say that if the free trade agreement is signed, it would wipe out Malaysian farmers as American farmers receive huge subsidies from the government and would flood the market with cheap rice. The activists also said it would force small and medium businesses in Malaysia to close shop, affect factory workers, and make books and medicine more expensive.
Under the Obama administration, we find that the talks have restarted again. We are very disappointed, and we want the Malaysian government to immediately stop all the talks with free trade agreement, because we find that these things are done in secrecy. It does not benefit the people. It is not presented in the Malaysian parliament. Our parliamentarians don't know anything about it, and yet it affects the 99% of all the Malaysian population.
Once the Trans-Pacific Partnership FTA is signed, the Malaysian Parliament would be forced to pass the implementing laws. If the laws are not to the advantage of the US, the Malaysian government could be sued, and if it loses the lawsuit, the US could raise tariffs on any Malaysian export as punishment. It would also make it harder for the government to regulate American companies, including environmental and health regulations. But economists linked to the government say that the FTA would increase the size of trade and create a bigger trading bloc within the Southeast Asian nations or ASEAN.
I think we should look at the bigger picture, largely because Malaysia has benefited tremendously from the expansion of trade in driving its domestic growth as well as transformation. So I think the protests may have a point in certain specific issues, but if you look at the overall larger picture of the trade gains, I think there is strong grounds for pursuing further liberalization.
The police kept a watchful eye throughout the one-hour protest. The protesters here say that they would continue demonstrating until the Malaysian government abandons all free trade agreements and talks with the United States and the European Union. Political analysts in the country also say that continued protests would not augur well for Prime Minister Najib Tun Razak, who is facing a general election early next year. Maheshwari Ramakrishnan, Press TV, Kuala Lumpur.
Caracas was coated with the atmosphere of regional unity. For the first time, all Latin American and Caribbean countries have come together under one bloc that promises to shape the future of the continent. The move is of particular interest since the US and Canada were excluded from the new community of Latin American and Caribbean states, CELAC.
Threats will dissipate and disappear from the horizon as long as we unite much more and stop remaining isolated, blocked, and threatened.
En la medida en que nosotros nos unamos mucho más.
For many other presidents participating in the summit, Bolivar's dream of a greater fatherland seems to have come true in the form of the CELAC. The CELAC gathers an estimate of 550 million people from the 33 member states that make up Latin America and the Caribbean, a region that holds about 20.5 million square kilometers of forests and jungles, the largest oil reserves of the world, and 30% of the sources of fresh water.
Can you imagine if we take all the fingers of all the hands of all of the 600 million persons of the nations of our region, united together, we can be a formidable force, a formidable group. There is no greater force than that. There is nothing more powerful than that.
The CELAC poses a unique scenario for governments of different ideologies to debate on common issues. Countries that have a good relationship with the US, like Colombia and Chile, can now voice their concerns, in spite that Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez claims the CELAC will play a key role in standing up to the American imperialism influence in the continent.
We seek an integral development that strengthens the freedom of our peoples, brings greater justice among our countries, and creates true and egalitarian opportunities, especially for the generations to come. This is our task and mission.
The CELAC agreed on all documents worked by senior officials and foreign ministers, as the Declaration of Caracas, the Caracas Action Plan 2012, and 18 reports on issues of political, economic, and social interests, including one opposing the US trade embargo on Cuba. In a previous statement, Chavez also said the CELAC would leave behind the Organization of American States, which according to him was worn out and controlled by the US.
The summit has raised hope for unity and cooperation in the continent in order to shield the region from international economic meltdown. The 33 member states are set to gather again in Chile next year. Ricardo Rojas, Press TV, Caracas.
Oh yes, we were aware this is a terrible crisis. We were aware that the Fed was doing other things. We made a note that we were going to try to put some limits on that, but not right at that time. So we were aware, yes, that there were other things that the Fed was doing to try and keep people liquid.
But there was no knowledge of the specific loans to the big banks.
Not to the specific entities. No, we knew they were. Well, who do you think they wanted to? The corner druggist. But we were also convinced that it was going to be repaid as it was. What we did in the bill that we passed was to severely curtail their discretion.
Okay.
Both in terms of requiring.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Monday, December 5th, 2011. I'm Darko. This is my website. You can check it out if you'd like. It's ggnonline.com. Also on YouTube, ddarko2012. You can check out this poll right here. How would you react to an attack, invasion by a foreign nation, i.e. Iran, China? So far, majority are saying 61% that they would join a patriot militia group to fight the attacker, followed by 31% saying they would refuse to join on religious, philosophical grounds. There's an email place right there. You can put your email and receive updates from GGN. I'm going to keep moving right now. Okay, the first article I have up is Peru declares state of emergency to end protests over gold mines. So you see this as a common theme in some of the news articles and videos I've been covering recently in these regions in South America and in South Asia. You see the people protesting in South Korea, not South Korea, but yeah, South Korea over the free trade agreements and that, and they're going to be bound by it. So now if they back out, they can be sued. So okay, so it says here the president of Peru has declared a 60-day state of emergency in the northern region racked by protests against a Highlands gold mine. And it says here the state of emergency restricts civil liberties such as the rights to assemble and allow arrests without warrants in 4 provinces of the state. It said it's been paralyzed for 11 days by increasingly violent protests against the $4.8 billion Conga gold and copper mining project. U.S.-based Newmont Mining Corporation is the project's majority owner. So just like in the other videos too, the U.S. Companies, right? The U.S. is gonna benefit, but is it gonna the U.S. the people gonna benefit? I don't think so. It's just big agriculture conglomerate companies that use taxpayer tax slave money. So I mean that's what it's all about. Moving on here, so that was Peru. Then look at this. You have the stormtroopers. Peru prison project protest turns violent. So now they're not going to be able to protest against this. At least one person has died and 20 more wounded as protesters clashed with police over a prison expansion project in southern Peru. And it goes on here, and it says, according to police sources, a 24-year-old man died of his wounds. Police used tear gas to disperse crowds who were throwing rocks at officers and vehicles. So it's pretty interesting that CELAC is basically the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, and it says a Peruvian president did not attend because of all this stuff that's going on in this country. But it just makes you wonder if, is this merging of the North American Union and the South American Union, is this what it is? Is this part of it? Is it really just coming together? Is that what it is? Or are they, or are they just looking after or looking out for themselves, saying, screw the United States? I can't really tell yet. But that's the ultimate goal, to merge all the unions together. So villages in Indonesia have been torched in unrest. As here, reports claim Indonesian anti-terrorist police have torched a remote village in the Papuan, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, highlands, amid clashes with the guerrilla rebels in the region. Activists say civilians have fled into the jungle in response to the unrest, and there are now grave fears for their safety. And basically what the point of this article is that it says the police were reportedly killed earlier in the day during an offensive launched by the militant Free Papua movement. So they just want to be free, right? The anti-terrorist brigade responded by setting fire to schools, a church, and houses in the village. So I guess there have been people up there that have gone up to the hide basically from these police, which seem to be everywhere. 100,000 people have hidden out in the mountains for up to 3 months before, and it says there's little food up there and not much cover, so pretty much they're going to go up there to die. But it says here, Indonesia's anti-terrorist police received training and funding from the Australian government, and I guess there's a lot of ties with them. But it goes on and says the Australian government, quote, does not train or fund Indonesia's security forces to counter separatism. We have Argentina announcing major oil discovery. Then next up, Ireland details austerity plans. It says the government Monday detailed tough austerity measures, including reductions in spending on welfare and health care to slash its budget deficit and achieve targets set by the country's bailout lending. So I guess it's just another reason for them to put lithium in the water, in the drinking water. Portugal raids pension funds to meet deficit targets. Portugal has raided 5.6 billion euros of pension fund assets in a controversial scramble to meet its deficit targets. Then we have Belgians stage mass protests against austerity measures, tens of thousands in Brussels on Friday. Merkel, Sarkozy favor treaty change, and it says here, to repair the troubled Eurozone, and it says here that they would forge ahead with a more integrated union, talking about a trading bloc for the families of some debtors. Death offers no respite, and talking about family members incurring the debt of deceased family members. But then we have this article that I found today. Children of welfare incur debts of parents. In 2008, Jamie Hartley was 16 years old. Her family was overpaid a total of $766 in welfare benefits. It says, but now the Riverside County is demanding that Hartley repay the debt and intends to, quote, intercept her next state income tax refund to get the money. California welfare regulations for years have allowed, even required, counties to go after minors for the debts of their parents, state officials told the AP. Who knows? Maybe they'll send them to a debtor's prison and they can work it off with slave labor. Prison labor says here, U.S. Postal Service facing 28,000 job losses. And Black Friday's bestseller is guns. Next up, Hank Paulson's Inside Jobs. And we covered this before, talking about him meeting with Goldman Sachs and that. Hooking them up, and it's weird that they use the word inside job, almost as if they're taking a crack at people who believe that 9/11 was an inside job. So Credit Suisse is going to plan a split up, and then we have Kraft hashes out details of a split. So a lot of splitting up of these big companies going on right now. And this is not really a surprise to me. GlaxoSmithKline pays U.S. government record $3 billion for illegally marketing drugs, but CEO and executives not held criminally responsible. That's because they're a corporation. Granted, corporation status from the United States government, which basically waives their liability. That's what the whole point of a corporation is. It's a person, just like you and your Social Security number and that. Contemporary forms of slavery, egregious violations of human rights, says UN chief. So he goes in here, and Ban Ki-moon says on Friday that millions of people are still subject to contemporary forms of slavery. Yeah, tax slavery. He said, despite the considerable efforts of government, civil society, and international community to enslave their people, we still live in a world blighted by slavery and slavery-like practices. This is GGN, and I'm Darko.